Hello everybody and welcome aboard the Hype Train. I of course am Sir Beardian, and today we are going to be talking about those new sensors. First things first, we have a new active sensor model for C# Aurora. In VB6, there is an issue with an active sensor ranges become so huge with large size 50 sensors that the standard tactic is to create a ship with such a sensor so that it can watch the entire inner system, taking away some of the fog of war. In addition, such extreme range sensors allow ultra long range missile combat, giving the race that possesses such sensors a major advantage, especially when you stick them on a PDC. Which does not use any maintenance whatsoever. It can be built with industry. The following change is intended to create a situation where A. Multiple scouts or pickets become a serious alternative to one huge sensor, B. Missile combat ranges are reduced, and C. Fog of war is increased, leading to more interesting exploration and combat. The VB6 sensor model is based on the following formula, which increases range in direct relation to sensor strength, which is sensor range equals racial sensor strength times hull size times racial EM sensitivity times the square root of resolution times 10,000 kilometers. The C# model uses similar basics and leaves all the existing technology in place. However, the sensor strength now has to cover an area rather than a direct range, creating diminishing returns for larger sensors. In addition, the modifier for resolution has been adjusted from square root to the power of 1 over 1.5. Because of this formula, smaller, lower resolution sensors are now more effective than the VB6 equivalents, much more in some cases, making earlier detection of missiles and fighters possible for non-specialized ships. The new formula is square root of racial sensor strength times hull size times racial EM sensitivity times resolution to the power of 1 over 1.15 divided by pi, all times 1 million kilometers. Now, words are difficult to track, numbers and charts are a lot easier to show. We have here an example of resolution sensors of various sizes and strengths. You can see that with the same strength, the current sensor model, a small sensor has a range of 2.3 million kilometers versus basically everything, because resolution 1. With about 10% of that for size 6 missiles. The C# model has 8.5 million kilometers with about 10%, so same percentage versus size 6 missile. Now there's also a radius versus size 1, which appears to be just a ratio of how much bigger this is versus this. 8.5 times 7 is about 60, yeah. Whereas with so small sensor you can see is about 4 times bigger, whereas the large sensor, which had 115 million kilometers, only has 60 million kilometers. So it's roughly about half. So that's just making it a little bit bigger. The size resolution 5 sensor we can see here goes from 5 million to 14 million for a smaller one, whereas the size 6 missile range you can see is actually still bigger, which is about 63 million kilometers. Now that is still a tiny fraction of the size resolution 1 sensor, so you still want to use a lower resolution for the size 6 missiles, but you can see that it is just more across the board, whereas the larger one drops from 258 to 100 million. So that is significantly smaller. That's less than half the size. Similar story for resolution 20. 10 goes up to 23, whereas the size 50 drops from 500 to 164. And again, for the resolution 100 sensors, 23 to 39 and 1.1 billion to 281. So you can see that it's quite clearly not going to be possible to get billion-kilometer range sensors that are going to be able to guide missiles all the way through. And having smaller sensor scouts is definitely going to be a significant advantage to having one very, very large sensor. The other thing to consider as well is if the sensor strength and the EM passive detection ranges are about the same, then you're still going to be able to see these sensors on passive EMs at a very long distance, and you're just not going to be able to see that ship. So passives are going to be a lot stronger. But while we're on the subject of passives, they get an overhaul too. A new passive sensor model has been implemented for C# Aurora, using similar principles to the new active sensor model. In VB6 Aurora, small ship-based passive sensors are not particularly effective compared to active sensors in terms of detection. Although passives do detect actives from a little bit further out if you have the same sensitivity. Although their passive nature does allow a ship some sensor capability without giving away its position. Planet-based passive sensors, deep space tracking stations, are very effective as they can be stacked to cover the whole star system. In C# Aurora, passive sensor model substantially improves small passive sensors, particularly against small signatures, while dramatically reducing the benefits of creating large numbers of deep space tracking stations. The VB6 sensor model is based on the following formula, which increases range in direct relation to sensor strength. So detection range is passive sensor strength times target signature times 1,000 kilometers. Fairly straightforward. For example, a strength 10 thermal sensor will detect a signature 500 target at 5 million kilometers. The C# model uses all the existing technology and tech values. However, the sensor strength now has to cover the area, creating diminishing returns for larger sensors. Detection range is square root of passive sensor strength times target signature, all multiplied by 250,000 kilometers. The same example as above, so strength 10 sensor, 500 strength signature, would result in a target detection range of 17.7 million kilometers, which is more than 3 times more. Because of the great improvement in the performance of small passive sensors, there is no longer an inherent size 1 passive sensor on all ships. In addition, the smallest functional passive sensor on a missile will be 0.25 MSP. We once again have some examples. So passive thermals go, you can see, from 1 million to 7.9, whereas larger ones go from 2 billion down to 353 million. So once again, massive large sensors get a nerf, small sensors get a buff. Speaking of missile sensors, missiles also get a pretty significant change. First of all, the launchers. First things first, fractional size launchers can be created. The minimum is still 1 hull size, but a launcher can now be 1.5, 2.7, etc., and everything in between. Second change, the reduced size launcher techs are all available immediately and do not need to be researched. This means box launchers are available from the start. The progression for reduced size launchers has, however, been altered slightly. 0.75 hull size is double reload, 0.6 is 5 times reload, 0.4 is 20 times reload, 0.3 is 100 times reload, and 0.15 is 100 reload box launcher. Note that this reload was times 15 in VB6. If a box launcher containing a missile is damaged, the missile will explode. I'd just like to say, my idea, you're welcome. The chance of this happening can be reduced by a new tech line. The first step reduces the explosion chance to 70% for 1000 RP, and the last step reduces to 5% for 120,000 RP. In addition, box launchers can only be reloaded in a hangar or at an ordnance transfer point. Reloading at an ordnance transfer point is 10 times slower than in a hangar, similar to the way maintenance facilities got that penalty. The base reload rate for all missile launchers is now square root of missile size times 30 seconds times reduced size modifier, all divided by reload rate tech. Assuming a race has reload rate tech of 3, a normal size 1 launcher will reload in 10 seconds, a size 4 will reload in 20 seconds, and a size 9 will reload in 30 seconds. This change will dramatically reduce reload times for larger launchers. The change for box launcher reload rate from times 15 to times 100 is not as dramatic as it seems for larger missiles due to the new reduced reload times for larger missiles. However, it is still a significant increase from VB6. A size 4 mounted missile on a box launcher will now take about 1 hour and 40 minutes to reload in a hangar and about 17 hours at an ordnance transfer point. A size 6 is about 2 and 20 hours respectively. These changes are intended to reduce the disadvantage of larger missiles by making them reload faster relative to smaller ones, and remove the realism of not having box launchers available at low tech, yet to make box launchers a more difficult decision versus standard type launchers. Related to launchers, missiles themselves have also been overhauled. First things first, missile engines follow the same size-based fuel consumption rules as ship engines using the formula square root of 10 divided by engine size and hull size. The above increases the fuel consumption of missile engines based on size alone. However, VB6 also had a flat ×5 multiplier for the overall fuel consumption for missile engines, as they were treated as a different engine type than ship engines. As C# is aiming for consistency between ship and missile engines, this 5 multiplier cannot remain as it was before. Removing the ×5 multiplier entirely would cancel out the fuel consumption increase resulting from the changes in the size-based fuel consumption calculation. As one of the objectives of C# is a reduction in missile ranges, a new rule is required that increases fuel consumption but that is still consistent with ship engines. Therefore, the calculation for fuel consumption based on boosting engines will now include an additional multiplier if the boost being used is higher than the maximum racial boost tech. Only missile engines have the capability to use higher boosts than the racial maximum, so this still allows consistency between ship and missile engines in the spectrum where they both operate. Once you move outside of the boost range possible for ships, additional fuel consumption can be added without breaking consistency. This rule adds a linear multiplier from 1 times to 5 times depending on the level of boost beyond the racial maximum. The formula is as follows. If higher than max boost multiplier tech, then the equation is boost used minus max boost multiplier tech, all divided by max boost multiplier tech, all times 4 plus 1. So if a race has max boost tech of 2 times, any missile with a boost level of 2 times or less will use the standard boost fuel modifier calculation of boost level to the power of 2.5. Above a boost level of 2, the linear higher boost modifier will come into effect, reaching the maximum of ×5 fuel consumption at 4 times boost level. Here is a comparison between VB6 and C# using MPD engines and an engine size of 1 MSP. The max boost tech for this race is ×2. So we can see that with VB6 missile engine with 2 times boost, engine power is 1.6, which is the same as the C#. Fuels per hour is 1.51. Fuels per hour is 76.8. So interestingly enough, the fuel use per hour is actually more with the VB6. So it's actually cheaper to run it at this level in the C# one versus the VB6 one. The engine use per hour, you can see, is 48 versus 50. The cost is doubled, however. So it's 1 MSP, but the cost is 0.8 versus 0.4. Thermosignature is, interestingly enough, not actually mentioned. Gas sight is, of course, the expense. With a 4 times boost with VB6, a 3.2 engine power, fuel use was 922 or 288 per engine power hour, whereas the C#, it jumps up to 4344 liters or 1357 per power hour. So that is way more expensive. So making very, very fast missiles is going to be much more fuel thirsty. Much more fuel thirsty. So that is definitely going to nerf missile ranges, for sure. And that is it for today once more. Join me again tomorrow where we will continue covering the changes for C# Aurora every day this month until launch. Down below, we have links to the official Aurora Discord, Reddit, and the forums where you can join the discussion and the hype. I, of course, am Siberian, and I will see you next time.